find a decent value, man. And that little thing, that little piece of is a picture I got from a shirt that went way out of print way too fast. I especially love the 8-bit Phoenix Wright, and it was available for like 2 weeks over Play Asia, but if you want them, you can get them on eBay now. I'm wearing the one from the 80s, but this particular one, as you can see, I love the little sprite Dante and stuff, but... I like the song not only for Street Fighter, Third Strike has a great soundtrack, but it's fun to play with the lyrics. To sing, let's see, one of my favorite ones. Like, sounds like she's saying, please, please, please in my hair, or bitch, what is that one? Pizza, 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 and bitch, dumb bitch, 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 dumb bitch, you know. Oh, by the way, there is profanity in this channel, quite a bit of it, so. But
you're too sensitive to have profanity in your ears.
If you listen to it, it's totally true. You can hear any of those. I hear pizza, yeah.
Show of hands, who has played Bionic Commando for the NES? How about for the PS3 and Xbox?
Is that another one that's really, you know, people say it's bad, but it's not nearly as bad, you know, like Dino Crisis 3 and, you know?
It could have, you know, it could have been better.
I mean, because all I ever hear about is like the arm is his mom, is his wife, and like, okay, that sounds.
That
sounds lame. But
it was in a batch. It was in the.
Is it like, you know, a Deus Ex Machina, or do they actually attempt to explain it in the game? Because
they do not explain it very well. It's just in a flashback.
I see. Yeah, I will get to it one day eventually. Yeah. Okay.
Sadly,
so I think someone had their hand up though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tal. Go ahead.
It was up there with Bomberman for the 360.
Oh really?
Oh God.
Okay.
It wasn't the worst game, but it was a big disappointment for people who love the classic.
Okay, because I thought you were going kind of like with the edgy complaint. You know how they made Bomberman edgy? Because the original Bionic Commando was plenty edgy. You were killing the Nazis / the bads. You know? It's like, you dare challenge me, you damn fool. That is Adolf Hitler. I love that.
It shouldn't have been a part of the series. It should have been called something totally.
You agree, though, that the NES version is pretty edgy, though?
Absolutely.
You know?
No, it was no.
No, I'm talking, you know, like, when it comes to Bomberman, everyone's like, you know, they took a cute little thing and tried to, like, gear some more it up to, you know what I mean? And it's not only a bad game, but it's like, you know, a game by committee, if you will.
You know, sadly, I tried to find it. I wanted to buy it. I wanted to play it.
I will try one day.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what we got first. Now, the way this basically works is we love having you all here, and despite me being a teacher, I don't like lecturing. I don't lecture in the classroom, so we want to hear from you, but as you know, we can't do all 30 years. We've got a little bit more time, but we got some topics we talk about. We move on, but feel free to raise your hands, and we'll try and get to people. And of course, we'll leave time at the end for like just about everything. And let's get started. What we got first? Yeah. Mega Man X4. I used to do Mega Man panels only, and I probably will do it again eventually. And I thought, if I'm going to come up to the essence of what Mega Man is, people would readily go to Mega Man 2 or 3, but for me, it's this one. First and foremost, this is where I'm being serious, it's for 3 reasons. I love the game not only because it's fun, I use it as an example of Capcom going against popular convention. Because this game was made when everybody and their mother was trying out 3D, but they stuck to their guns and stuck to 2D, and it looked brilliant then, and it looks even brilliant nowadays. It's got amazing music, and of course the third one, most infamous reason, is stuff like this, which also makes it timeless.
Iris's death scene.
Iris!
Wait, she died?
Iris! Spoilers.
They could have did better with the voice acting.
Please, stay away.
Why does she sound British?
Let's live together in a world where only Reploids exist.
When you play it,
there's no world just for Reploid. It's only a fantasy.
Yes, I know, but I wanted to believe it. I wanted to live in a world where only Reploids exist with you.
Iris!
Like, not, besides the whole Guns N' Roses thing in X4, X5, there's so much text in that game. It's stuff like this, why they didn't want to do voice acting again, you know?
Iris.
Oh, and I'm totally gonna yell the meme, so feel free to yell at me.
No, this isn't happening. There's no reason for me to go on. What am I fighting for?
No? Oh, come on. I feel like you're my students again. But you can balance the seriousness and the silliness of it. And I think, like the kind of people, I know they're not intentionally doing it, but the kind of people who like rant and rave about Legends 3 and things like that, and as I tried to do in the panel description, they're like, Capcom hates us, they only care about money. Well, this example flies right in the face of theories like that, because they would have made it 3D and all that stuff if they cared about money. Granted, you can make the argument that's a different Capcom, but there's plenty of other examples too. So, what we do now is like, turn it to you, like your thoughts on not just Mega Man 4, but like Mega Man in general, and kind of keep it going from there.
Basically, one of my favorites is one of the favorite Mega Man X's I have a couple of them, are Mega Man X. Remember the one for the PSP?
Yeah.
Maverick Hunter X. I love that because yes, thank you. Because basically it played out just as the same as the first Mega Man X, with some new twists on it as well. I mean, the first, when you select your boss, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You don't know what stage you have to go through until you like find out, and everything. One of my I think I forgot which order it was, but when they had it for the Super Nintendo, favorite, I had to play the bird dude. What was his name?
Storm Eagle.
Storm Eagle.
Yeah,
I always went for Storm Eagle first,
Yeah.
and then who was it that I went to second? I think it was
Flame Mammoth.
Flame Mammoth. I went to Flame Mammoth.
He's pretty difficult if you need at least the dash boots. I'm not sure it's possible to beat him without the dash boots. It is? Okay.
Oh, that's right. You get the dash boots in
Yeah.
Chill Penguin stage.
Yeah.
No, you don't have to. You just.
can't skip it. It blocks your path. You have to get.
Yeah, you have to get the dash boots.
Even in Mega Man Maverick Hunter X?
Yeah.
Because I know they changed the location. It's in the Storm Eagle stage now.
They did change some of the locations in X, and actually, y'all probably gonna boo me. One of my favorites is Mega Man X7.
I like it.
Boo this man.
I knew somebody was gonna try to boo me, but when I played it for the first time, I will admit it, I fell in love with Axel. You can hate me all you want. I fell in love with Axel. I love Axel. I love his power to be able to copy enemies.
Considering where Mega Man originated as a vehicle for Zero, and it was just kind of thrown in, it's an odd complaint when people say they don't like the game because you can't play X right away, among other problems, but that's the one I usually hear right away. And the voice acting is bad, of course, but as I just saw, that can be charming. The gameplay is really not that bad, but again, I'm glad they fixed it in X8, because like, for instance, the only time I really thought the camera was bad in X7 is when you have to fight Red, because it's over a bottomless pit, and it's very easy to die. It's not even a hard battle, but it would have been worked just fine if it had been in 2D, probably.
I'll also give X8 some of its due a little bit. The only thing I kind of hated about it was that when you die, when one of your characters die, you come in, but you can revive him, but you don't have those lives. You have to start over from the beginning or from a checkpoint.
With Maverick Hunter X, I also like how, like we were talking about it, like it was a bit of a veteran's trap. They threw us off. They didn't change any of the weaknesses really, but voice acting was fun. The one thing that I'm pretty unequivocal about is when I first saw it, I kind of thought it was ugly. I really wish it had been high-res 2D, like the Final Fantasy games on the PSP, because it's not that it looks bad, but to me, the first game I think of is a little game called Final Fight Revenge, which also should have been in 2D. And I don't think it ruins the game, either of them in those cases, but considering where they were and what those two systems are capable of, the Saturn and the PSP, I just don't understand the decision to make it in 3D. But the music, I think almost all of them are superior in their own way. Like, I think Spark Mandrill's theme is much better than the SNES version. Some people don't agree, but I like it. But yes?
The Strider remake, PS1.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, the Strider remake. Actually, it was a really
Very easy game, but I liked it, you know. Cause
Wait, which one are we? Wait, which one are we talking about? Strider 2 or?
Strider 2, yeah.
But it was the 3D remake.
I haven't played the one
Not
on
the new
X.
Xbox One.
I haven't played that yet, but
Yeah.
it's like Metroid, and I'm
I mean,
interested
you
in
can
that,
actually you can blast through that. You can blast through Strider 2 really
Well,
easily.
it's only a 45-minute game if you can blast
Yeah.
through it on
I
it.
like
Exactly. Yeah.
that does play to that point though, because they kept that 2D, and that was like 2001.
2D with 3D
Little
with
bit-
3D
a
graphics.
good
Much
blend,
like
yeah.
Maverick Hunter X.
Yeah.
I mean, 2D with 3D graphics.
Yeah.
A lot better than Maverick Hunter X, but.
Yeah, it's a point that more and more as I play the game more, I'm kind of like, I can't affect the change. I don't even care anymore, really. But it was just when I first saw the game, I was like, really? But
They
it doesn't
should've
really
just
bug me that much.
re-released it with a higher res. That's
Yeah.
what they should've done.
Even
Like if you look at the one I go to often is the Final Fantasy games. I mean, those look brilliant on the PSP, and those are the ones they ported to iOS later. You were saying?
even on the hardest mode in Strider 2, you can really blast through it real quick.
Strider 2 is a different story, but Strider 1 on PS1 is still about as difficult as the Genesis NES version. But it's all memorization. That's
Speaking of Strider, something I find odd, I think it was mostly because Screw Attack are not fans of it. I like the NES version because it's an example of, it's a good example of, you know, taking something that's inferior, you know, obviously you couldn't port the Genesis version, but making something unique of that, making it an RPG, and I think it's a pretty cool game, but, you know, I mean, yeah, I can understand you'll dislike it because it's not Strider, but that's what the Genesis version is for.
Actually, a fun fact, if you don't know about this, Strider is actually based off a comic book. So basically, the comic book and the video game and the NES video game are actually two in the same. It basically the video game basically tells the story from the comic book.
I actually didn't know.
Over there?
I feel like Strider on the NES
Yeah,
is like Contra Force in that if it called it anything else other than a decent game.
true.
If you label it that and it's not the same as another, people have problems.
Contra Force I didn't dislike, but you know, it cost a lot of money, yeah. You know, so I object to that, but it's definitely not a Contra game, I know what you mean. Over there?
Strider for the NES actually wasn't even released in Japan.
It wasn't?
It was
No,
not.
it
Yeah.
wasn't.
They,
Yeah.
but the thing is though, like I think the story was when Capcom got it, they like just rushed out the English translation to fix a little bugs. That's why it's still buggy because like for whatever reason Japan never released it.
I've only played it like once, but I do remember, I certainly didn't think it was horrible, you know. But
If it had more polish, it could have been a lot of fun, but it definitely lacks polish.
Yeah, especially when you're trying to do the triangle jump. Yeah, that's the hard.
as long as we can all agree, as long as we
Yeah.
can all agree that probably the worst Capcom NES game is Yonoid. Because they made that. Section Z? I don't know. But Yonoid was just a game where they took a game that was pretty good and then they decided to slap a license on it and actually made it harder. And I don't know what they were doing with that, you know, so it's just,
It was made for Japanese people.
yeah.
All right, quick question. Who's ever played Bionic Commando for the arcade version? Raise your hand.
Oh, the original,
I
yeah.
have not.
Oh my God! Do whatever you do not play it. It is hard as hell. You will die. You will die so often in that game. You will just rage quit on it.
Since we were talking about
Sure.
the PS1 Mega Man, so I'm curious.
We're kind of I mean, I try and set a general goal, but we can jump around. I don't mind really.
I'm just curious your thoughts on the voice actor choice for Mega Man 8.
Mega Man 8. Oh yes, Dr. Wowie. I've heard lots of stories, but much like the surprisingly boring answer I found out from the guy behind Saturnology, you know, it sometimes comes down to just cultural bias, and the go-to story is apparently it was just a guy. What was it? He someone at the Japanese studios who like barely spoke English, kind of like a Zero Wing type thing, or is that the truth or not really?
I imagine someone Hispanic and homeless.
Yeah, I don't know if it, okay. I mean, jokes aside, I don't know if because I can do both, but I don't know if anything but internet rumors have ever actually addressed that. Like
For
who
those of
did
you
it?
who've never heard it, it's
Yeah.
what are we gonna do about the energy crystals?
Yeah.
Well, Mega Man, Dr. Wowie's got the energy crystals.
But it did come out around the same time as X4, and X4 had plenty of terrible dialogue too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way I like to joke with X4 is that it became 4 kids, and we all know about 4
Oh
kids.
yeah.
That's where those guys found work because they couldn't find it anywhere else. Yeah. But that's a fun one. So, questions or questions in general about Mega Man, or what, you know, like not even stick to it, but I just use it as discussion points, but like stuff you want to raise, anybody, if you got questions or something you want to talk about, ask opinions, yep.
I mean, I don't want to big time your panel talk about, you know, you're talking about Mega Man, but like going back to
That's cool.
the original, you know, Capcom computers, anything back in the day that y'all want to talk about, like, Fighting Street or Street Fighter?
Yeah, we do have a little bit on
Yeah,
that.
we have some of that.
Oh God.
Don't
He
mention
doesn't
that.
like it. He doesn't like it. I do.
No, I told
I
you
know
this
you didn't
before.
like
Yeah,
it.
because
I understand.
the controls are broken. You know, you're trying to you want to jump. You don't know which button.
It took NES hard to a new level. It was retarded.
Yeah, thank you.
The closest thing I compare it to is Ninja Gaiden, and Ninja Gaiden, the graphics, I mean, the control is a lot better, but it's, you know, because they both have unlimited continues, as you persevere, you can have fun with it, you know, and it gave us 2 classic reviews. I often like to think, which is funnier, the Angry Video Game Nerds version or Spoonie's version? They're both hilarious in different ways. Like, I love in Spoonie's version where he goes, go to planet Sand Dune, and he starts playing the music from Dune. It's hilarious. They're both great for their own ways, reasons. Yeah.
2010 started you off with a boss.
Yeah.
That's what, it was ridiculous.
It's basically a big honking boss fight. You know?
Yes,
that's all it is. It's just a big honking boss fight.
There's all, you know, the politics, like all that behind, you know, like originally, much like you had said, you know, if they hadn't put the name, it would have been just considered probably maybe an average or slightly above average game. So, you know, I think it was Joey DeCina, the 16-bit gamer, it's 16-bit gems. He said, I'd always tried to find a way to articulate, but he said corporate decisions come down to 2 things, stupidity or in rare case malice. In many cases, I think stupidity is usually the answer. You know, so stupidity in that case, you know, like we're not gonna like try and screw anybody over. We just think like, ooh, easy money, doi. You know, like if we call it Street Fighter, these are all kids or something, and this is before the internet, so they won't know anything and they'll buy it, you know, or something like that. But they always underestimate them. Yeah. Okay. Anything else before we move on to the next series, games, points? Okay. Let's see what else we got next. I'm trying to remember, but I don't always, you know, like it's very improvisational in its own ways. Oh yes, Resident Evil and everything surrounding it. Speaking of voice actors, the way I start this off, I found out something very interesting, and feel free to correct me on any of this, but if it is in fact true, I think it's hilarious. Let's see.
Whisker!
This is Resident Failus from,
Die, monster!
You
You
combine
don't belong in this world.
What? Chris, I think you misunderstand me.
I see.
If you
takes
succeed
to
in
his voice
developing
and
the
changes
world's
the
most
dialogue.
powerful biological weapon, what would you do? What if you were in charge?
Your words are as empty as your soul.
What? Chris, no one understands its real value.
Oh, I see.
I think we should
The credits say
save this
otherwise, but
research for
the
future
research I did
use.
online suggests that
Mankind
Chris is
ill
voiced by
needs a
Michael Goff.
savior such as you.
What? Chris,
Yeah,
both
who
you
gets
and
sacked
Barry
later
seem
in
to
Resident
think I
Evil
was
4, and that's
following
quite a
orders
little
from
bit
the
of
rep, But Umbrella
you know.
does not know what to do with the Tyrant virus.
Barry, where's Barry?
I just used him for my personal purposes.
Wesker, you steal men's souls and make them your slaves.
What? Don't be upset. Barry is no longer useful.
Wesker, I'm sorry. I understand.
What?
And this is just silly, but I find it funny.
Since there are a lot of chemicals in this room, I have to prepare something.
It's dangerous. Don't touch it.
I know, I know. Oh! Oh no!
Rebecca.
What? Oh! Oh no! Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Chris, are you okay? Rebecca! Well, I'm really sorry. Are you alright? No. Rebecca, get the hell out of here!
If you want to see any of those, you just look it up on YouTube. They're called Resident Hazard and stuff, and there's like 3 of them. I just took the best. But working from that point, as you can clearly see, using the dialogue from Richter Belmont from Symphony of Night and Chris, it's the same voice actor. But it's interesting because that's where the information kind of gets difficult, because on IMDb, I believe it was among others, they said that Richter was voiced by a man named Scott McClellan, I believe. So that doesn't gel with that. So it's one of those issues that's up in the air, like even though it's clearly the same guy. So the credits of Resident Evil say one thing, and then IMDb says something else. It's one of those fun little things where I think it would be funny because jumping just briefly to Resident Evil 4, not only is Sadler one of my favorite villains in all of Resident Evil, not only because he had better plans than Umbrella ever did, you know, not like blackmailing the government or anything like that, you know, using religion, that's always a classic trick, and a little healthy dose of anti-Americanism, which is always fun. And the thing I wonder about him, though, is that what exactly is Sadler? The game doesn't even talk about it, you know, like, he's obviously not some human who had a plaga put into him because he's not subject to like random mutations. He seems like he can do whatever he wants. And of course you have the long tail too that everybody likes to joke about. But it's one of those things that the game, similar to what we were kind of saying earlier about Strider and stuff like that, given its long development history, it always was intended to be a Resident Evil game, but it's almost like they forgot near the end, like, you know, there's some things we actually should explain here. You know, I mean, like, you got stuff like Ada in the game that's like for fan service but you also got enough to have it stand on its own. But it's curious because they create a new character designed to stand on his own, but they don't even bother explaining what he is. I guess it's just like, don't touch him, he's evil. But it's the things I wonder about. And does anybody have? One person did give me an interesting theory a few MAGFests ago that because of the way the plagas work and they can alter people's minds based on what their ambitions are, someone suggested that he was like a minor priest or monk in the Los Alamados. They talk in the game about how they had been marginalized by like the Salazar family and stuff like that, so he like used his resentment along with some plaga he seemed to find somewhere, and that allowed him to get all those powers. I don't think so, but it's a fun little theory, and I have the feeling that Resident Evil 4 is popular for everything but its storyline, so that's one of those little unfortunate things that I don't think we'll ever find out about. Anybody have any thoughts to add to that? Well, like, what is Sadler?
No.
Nope, no one's interested. Boring, feel free to say boring.
Could it just be more writing?
I'm good, that's what, you know, all the evidence seems to suggest, you know, it's kind of unfortunate.
Yes, you, oh wait.
Go on. You have
I
more
was
to
gonna
say.
say, you know, if you have a franchise, unless you've got a director or someone who has like the ability to have total control over who's on the team, it's whoever they can get, whoever's available, or whoever somebody arbitrarily decides, okay, we'll hire that guy because he's the cheapest, or he was there at the right place, right time, and they don't always do a good job. So.
Yeah, it's kind of boring how, I mean, it's kind of dull how simple the answers are, but it's fun to speculate anyway. You had something else?
I was gonna say, you know, Resident Evil 5 and 6, you know, they add little like loading screen details where it's like, oh, this happened, and what you missed in the first
Oh,
game.
yeah.
Yeah,
But it's a series that was created only with, you know, one game, and then they keep adding on story elements trying to make it make sense.
Yeah.
But at this point, I mean, then you play 6 and they're like, oh, it's Wesley's son.
Yeah, I understand. I know.
It's like, when did that happen? You know, they're just like,
That's a very good question. When did that happen?
I enjoy Resident Evil.
When did Wesker actually have the time to care about some other a human woman that he would just want to bang on? Yeah, how fast he moves.
But it's a game that, you know, and it didn't really, I guess it kind of made sense. Raccoon City made sense, right?
Yeah.
But now it's, you know, I just,
like hand up the, you know, like up their asses, yeah, they get pretension, stuff like that, you know, they let it go all over the place. And it's nice that they reconciled it, or at least attempted to, you know, like by the load screens you said, but it didn't really end up working that well. You know. Go on, yeah.
We're playing 6, Leon's campaign, and at the beginning they're like, it's airborne, and you're like, why are we okay?
Good one. I only played the game once.
That's a damn good question. I'm actually still trying to play through 6 right now. I'm actually on Leon's quest right now, so no spoilers.
It's the first 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. 6 feels like a game that's very much designed by committee. Like everyone had their opinions, especially trying to like bring back Resident Evil 2 with like the different systems, the different characters. And I don't think it's a bad game by any means, but it feels like the closest example I always use is the movie Maleficent, which was a movie made by committee, so it comes off as feeling very unsatisfying. Like there's rumors behind, you know, like this director clashed with this writer, and you know, and Snow White and the Huntsman was another example, and it happens all the time because too many cooks spoil the broth, that kind of stuff like that, or similar to what you were saying.
Was that Disney movie, the Pixar one, the red hair?
Brave.
Oh yeah, that's another one, yeah. That not so as much because it turned out pretty well also, but it leaves me with a kind of feeling of like, I don't know how to feel about it in the end, but I'm not about to say it's a bad game, but besides your obvious example, that's bad, obviously. But I did the same thing in Resident Evil 5 when it first came out because they really teased us with it, because Wesker comes marching down the stairs and he goes like, so we first met at the Spencer estate, and I'm like, oh my god, did they just completely forget about Code Veronica? But it turns out they were like pulling the, you know, that was like one of their little inside jokes because he's referring to earlier when Jill was quote unquote killed. So, but that was a fun little example of kind of doing the opposite. Or maybe it's not that. Maybe they.
You don't know why she's blind.
Maybe they had forgotten about Code Veronica, and then some assiduous fans reminded us, like, don't forget about that game, and they're like, oh yeah, you know,
Did you ever
because.
see the commercials for 5 where the guy was gonna jump off the bridge?
Yeah, that was.
Like, it was so scary,
That was some weird commercial. More than anything, even though I like 5, it was a disappointment because I think his name is Takeuchi or something like that, one of the producers. He said, you know, like, this is gonna be awesome being in Africa, zombie lions, zombie elephants, no such thing.
Zombie tribesmen.
You know, so many opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because there's a
alligators.
zombie elephant in Outbreak 2, which is probably the standout of that, even though some people really, really do enjoy those games. I don't find them that interesting, but, you know.
Alright.
I mean, they put a zombie elephant in that game, and they couldn't do it in Resident Evil 5, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, they're in Africa. How can you not have a zombie elephant?
It is, after all, airborne, like you said.
Alright, another question. Who has played Resident Evil Operation Raccoons?
Best game ever. I kid.
Oh, okay.
You do. Okay, I'm about to
I
stop.
love glitches, so.
Oh, it's actually.
Oh,
So
I could never. As one thing, I hated. I never could get past the first.
it's one of those traditionally bad games. It's not like a by committee game, you know, feeling like they had to copy everything and trying to track the first-person shooter fans are going.
It's gonna be a Mystery Science Theater.
Eventually?
one day.
Yeah.
It's just hilariously bad.
So it's bad in every.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should ask.
So it's like Resident Evil Survivor, basic, you know.
We should ask the angry video game nerd to
Ah,
actually
okay.
play. We should really ask the angry video game nerd to play that and see what he thinks about it.
Fun, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Who wants to hear about my Resident Evil moment one night?
Go ahead, tell us. I'm interested.
Okay, here we go. At one point, I went to the store. I'm in line and I'm about ready to purchase some stuff. And there's this woman right in front of me, and she mistakenly drops a jar of mustard on the floor. Now to myself, to everybody else, no one's thinking, okay. But to me, Resident Evil gamer, I had a Resident Evil moment. I was like, oh shite. and then when she went to go get another one, I went to the cashier and I told him, you see, this is what happened in Raccoon City. Someone mistakenly dropped a vial of hazardous materials on the floor, and next thing you know, we got people, we got zombies there, we got zombies in our house, zombies in the whole area who are trying to get after our meaty deliciousness. who with retard strength trying to get at our meaty deliciousness.
It's almost right in the name, you know, like you have to wonder. To me, what it was in my similar story, it's kind of more, it's not as complicated. It's pretty much I just saw the box. Resident Evil 2 in this case was my first one. I went back and played Resident Evil after, but I simply looked at it and, you know, despite all the cutting edge marketing, if you will, like something, how did that go? If fear doesn't kill you, something else will. I'm like, ooh, scary. And like, to me, I kind of was blasé about most PlayStation games, you know, kind of like, ooh, fancy graphics, traditional gameplay. But then I looked to the lower right of it, and I saw a word, and I said, well, I'm interested now, and that word was Capcom. Because even well before this, you know, that's where they really started making their money, really becoming well-known. As people seem to really know, I think they were definitely solid in the NES and SNES era, so I was glad to see that because Sony did everything possible to try and, you know, attract the MTV gamers and pretend that it was going to be all new crap with like ESPN skateboarding and stuff, and I felt very reassured when I said like, oh well, they're also still being smart, so they're getting Capcom, and it turned out to not be a mistake at all. And even recently, playing the Saturn version of Resident Evil, way too expensive. but it has a nice little surprises, like a second tyrant at the end that I didn't know about originally. And but even the cheesiness of it, like in Japan, it's referred to as Biohazard, and like very simple name, but apparently there's a band that didn't like that, so they create a perfect B-movie title, and that just kind of feeds itself to this, and it gives us tributes like this. And I don't think I turned off the sound. Okay.
Landing here.
Oh, sorry.
But no, like some pro-ass motherfucker, because
this is an example of a scene that is completely the opposite of what he says.
So done. See, there you go.
I gotta do this again, I'm sorry. But I thought it was something first, but what this scene is, an attempt, besides the profanity of course, is it's completely the opposite of what the game intends the scene to be. You know, it's one of those moments that's legitimately scary when you first see William Birkin in that. But the way when I was watching him Let's Play this is Alpha Omega Sin, I thought this was hilarious because I don't think I'm ever gonna be able to play this game again without thinking of this. And let me just jump to there, I apologize.
Wesker! Chris! You're alive!
I just wanted to say that before. I had it out of order, but yes, that's enough.
Landing here. But no, like some pro-ass motherfucker, because his name's Leon Kennedy. Nice to meet you. Oh, you're fucking done, dude. So done. See, there you go. La Blue Girl style. Getting throat fucked proper.
This especially.
William Birkin totally sexed the shit out of him. And he's looking around, he's like, I hope nobody saw me do that, because that's definitely a rape charge I can't afford. And then he dips the fuck out of them. He's like, okay, I'm done. All right.
Completely the opposite of what they're trying to do in the game, but every time I play it, I'm totally going to be thinking that out, because it really looks like that's what he's doing. He's like, whoop, hope no one saw me. I reckon he played the entire Resident Evil, and the first game Resident Evil, and Resident Evil 2, and Survivor, and I recommend you go watch them if you like. Definitely tons of jokes like that. Like speaking of Resident Evil Survivor, the best part is when Art Thompson near the end, he goes like, I was sent here by my friend, Leon Kennedy. And then he mocks him going like, that's right, my friend, Leon Kennedy, who I've never mentioned before because he fears that I might be mentally handicapped. And that's his thoughts on it. And it's just hilarious to watch it because I'm not saying Survivor is awful, but it's best to watch it with like commentary or something like that because it's not even a terribly long game.
Mystery Science Theater.
Maybe they will do it eventually or something like that. But, you know, Let's Plays can be hit or miss, but I happen to think that those are particularly good ones and I can firmly recommend them. But going from the cheesiness of it, it's kind of the opposite. This is what I originally intended. It's right like in the name with Resident Evil. It doesn't necessarily, you can, like as I was attempting to do with Sadler and stuff like that, you can talk about like all the labyrinthian plots and stuff, but at the bottom line, it's ultimately a pretty simple story. It's zombies are over there, kill they ass and stuff. And I think that was the spirit that these guys had when they made this tribute with absolutely no budget. This is a group called the Bentley Brothers. I believe they're on YouTube also. I know they're British, that's all.
Let's go, Joe. What happened to Joe Wesker? What am I talking to myself?
So what are we doing again?
When she comes out of the door, we chase her down. Not too fast, though.
Well, what do we do if she goes back in?
Well, we can't open doors unless it's an F&B, so nothing, really.
So what are we doing?
Just return to your original positions, and everything will be fine. Sorry, go!
That's what zombies do when you're not around. I especially love you can't open doors unless it's an F&B. Did I have any more than that? I don't think I did, but I definitely recommend it. And the next thing is just going to be a little thing that sums up Resident Evil 6 perfectly. So before we do that, I think, anything else we want to talk about Resident Evil in general? Yep.
I just wanted to get everyone's opinion on the fact that Resident Evil has transitioned from a survival horror to an action horror game. I mean, 4, 5, and 6 would be great games, in my opinion. Great games.
As another series.
As a different series.
Yeah.
They had their Resident Evil name. They're not Resident Evil games. The real Resident Evil 4 is Code 1. Everybody knows that. But, I mean,
It's true, yeah. That game doesn't get enough love,
Do you
yeah.
think they're ever gonna, or do you even hope that they would ever go back to the survival horror puzzle element, key codes, chess pieces?
Unfortunately, I haven't played it, but I heard that the one on the 3DS originally is a lot like that. What's it called? Revelations. And now I know they just announced the second one. But
They also announced that they're remaking Resident Evil 1.
Oh yeah, again,
but
yeah.
They're saying it's not going to be the survival horror like they did for GameCube. They're going to do in-action horror like 6.
Yeah. Did they actually say that they were going to change the way it was played?
That's what I read on IGN.
Okay. Well, there you go. You read it on IGN, but yeah, I know.
There is something to that though, and that's because when Resident Evil was when Biohazard was first conceived, the PlayStation, they didn't exactly know how to integrate well, we can't really do real good 3D with it, so we'll do rendered backgrounds and then we'll have models on top of it like Final Fantasy VII was for the PSX, and so it was like, okay, so that means that what we can do is we'll let the game be since you can't move the camera, then you have limited view, so then that means that you can be surprised and you can do all sorts of horror things with that. So that's why the game is like that. But as they got more comfortable putting those characters and killing zombies in different settings where you had free camera control and inventory systems and stuff, then all of a sudden now it's
I will comment on that after, but what?
Well, I was gonna say it's one of those things where you can even take away the fixed camera selection and have a fluid right angle camera that 5 and 6 have. But to take away all puzzle aspects or 90% of them and it completely changes the makeup of the game.
I will say something, but first we'll hear from you.
So, I don't think actually you're going to go to the more survival horror idea, which kind of like how the Japanese have an idea about Americans. The creator of...
They dumb all their games down.
You put that very politely, thank you.
Don't make their games out necessarily. The creator of Monster Hunter was surprised to find out that American players were more as reserved as they were when they were playing the game. They weren't just trying to mash buttons hard to attack the monsters. So I think they had this idea about Americans that were more of a brash type that wasn't really salty or anything like that. We prefer action.
I tried my best to like Siren, for instance, but I couldn't get into it, so I'm not entirely immune to that. Similar to what you were saying, I do like it. But something else, or do you want me? Okay, but what it basically is, I think what people need to know mostly about Resident Evil 4, development hell, but fundamentally, aside from the camera, and you're right about the puzzles, not completely, but it's essentially the same game. Just the only thing that's really changed is the camera angle. It's still, the combat is still very methodical, and granted ammo, that is a little different, but one point I do want to make sure to emphasize is not so much Code Veronica, but Resident Evil 3 is an action game. The puzzles, well, with one or two exceptions, the puzzles are incredibly easy in that game, and I think that is really where they started going for action.
Comparatively, not to today's standards.
The biggest difference for me is Resident Evil 6. How often do you think about ammo, and how often do you backtrack? Never.
Because after all, in Resident Evil 3, you can make ammo, and even Resident Evil 4 doesn't have that.
Yeah, that was a good.
There's another aspect to this though, and that is that puzzles in games like the first 2 Resident Evils were okay because people didn't have cell phones, a second screen that they're playing a game, they can flip over to it and look something up. Because that's what people do now. They load up a.
That's depressing. I agree.
And that's just how they get the which the game they don't try. So now as a game designer, you're like, if you know that that's happening, you plan your games before that. So it's like if you're gonna put puzzles in it, then either they have to be somehow randomly generated, so that you have to know how to solve the puzzle as opposed to solving a specific puzzle, or you have to be something that's like resource management, Twitch play,
And they do that in Resident Evil 3. There are a few puzzles that are randomized. Like, I don't like the water treatment puzzle near the end because I understand it and you just have to watch it, but it kind of slows the action down, and that's one of the worst. I just don't find it fun at all, but it does have an example of both. Back there first, yeah.
I just think it's strange how Resident Evil is taking cues from, Alone in the Dark for the PC, to Metal Gear Solid, to now it's in a whole nother realm. Where would you like to see it go? I mean, it's changing all the time.
I don't know. I mean, that's, I do see this as, as the title jokes, I don't think we need to be vulgar, vulgious, or judgmental about it, because Capcom has been on the edge, or has, the GameCube, the Capcom 5 on the GameCube is one of the saddest stories in the last decade or so in video games, and I read a lot of articles in preparation, but I still think for the most part that was, speaking of the original Resident Evil remake, and that sure didn't turn out well, but it was an example of something besides trying to make money. But what I think if I had to just, off the top of my head, the one I usually go to is, I don't want it to be a first-person shooter, but the example I always think of was, not only because it was hyped to hell, was the game BioShock, but I always like to think of the game BioShock as instead of a slightly above average RPG, first-person shooter, I would have liked to see it as an RPG. Or maybe a true survival horror game, you know, like not, you know, so maybe something like that for Resident Evil, I don't know, but not like Resident Evil Gaiden, no. Not like that on the Game Boy Color. Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody's like at the helm, you know, like it's just Capcom's thing.
I'll stay open-minded, that's what I'm trying to say, you know?
It'll evolve however Capcom wants it to evolve.
Yeah. Because there's so many examples of what we think we know something is, and then, you know, like, because if we had stuck to their guns, I think people would have because Resident Evil did not sell bad before Resident Evil 4, and I mean, it shot off after that, of course, but I still believe the highest selling one is Resident Evil 2. Or maybe not anymore, but for a long time I think it was. And
I would say, I just don't think it sells co-op games. People like that. And the split screen co-op is making a bit of a comeback, I think, since some people just don't want to play online and they don't want to pay for it. You know, Xbox, PS4 now. But I also think you can only scare people once with that. It's like watching a movie, like, you know, a really good movie, but once you know the ending.
Resident Evil, to me, was never really about scariness. I mean, it was the idea that I found scary, but I won't say so much disappointed, but I was almost like, the idea of it, in this case it was in Resident Evil 2, was Mr. X. When I first read about him, they described him as like the Terminator in an overcoat. And while a game like, I believe, even though I haven't played it, I believe Silent Hill 4, it actually has a similar type guy where he does follow you the whole game, and Mr. X turned out to be nothing like that. You know, he only shows up like 4 or 5 times, and maybe the first encounter is tough because you have barely any ammo, but the idea of it is very menacing, and they carried that over into the Umbrella Chronicles game. But in many ways, I think Resident Evil, the most interesting part for me was always the pseudo-scientific story, the government corruption, and all those things like that. And that's what I've always enjoyed. But scariness, not really. You know?
You can watch an old horror movie again that you enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's just me. I mean, it's the kind of series, and I think that's why we remember it, because it has something for everybody.
Actually, this, like, Capcom said, my friends who are spoiler stickers, it's not just about like what happens, it's the storytelling, it's how you come to it, and like how the narrative is played out when you play it. Some games do it well, and some games don't. So like if you feel that it's like, you know, the ending surprises are ruined, you know, they're in there, probably not very good for it.
We could go ultimately on about Resident Evil on and on, but I've done panels on that too, but unfortunately we're going to have to move on. So let's see what we have next. Oh yeah, this was the closing thought.
You start to play Resident Evil 6. You hammer the buttons and wiggle the sticks. Punch or to shoot or to jump or to kick. You hammer the buttons and wiggle the sticks. I'm screaming at Leon because he's so thick.
But that's
Spatial awareness is bad to the brick. The camera keeps jerking, it's making me sick. So hammer the buttons and wiggle the sticks. What's with these controls? Are they taking the mick? No, hammer the buttons and wiggle the sticks. Just give me some options, a tactic to pick. No, hammer the buttons and wiggle the sticks. These damn QTEs happen too bloody quick. I'm tired of shaking the analog stick. If the camera keeps jerking, I'm gonna be sick. So hammer the buttons and wiggle the sticks. Hammer the buttons and wiggle the sticks.
It's just, again, I think I summed that up essentially by the committee argument, you know, like, it's what it is, and we'll look back on it fondly, just like we will back at the voice acting or say the puzzles and everything, but that's what those games are for. And let me, I think next was, oh yes, now back to a little bit more lighthearted, the Versus series, Street Fighter in general. But I thought, so many games, unfortunately, because of money, I've never gotten into the Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, so and I know that's what everyone likes to talk about, but I'm not really big in competitiveness and stuff, but I definitely follow it from an artistic point of view. And I thought, what were the two things, both keeping in mind in humor and other things, that could sum up the whole Capcom effort when it comes to fighting games? Because, again, we could do a whole panel on that, you know, but I don't have tons of time, but then I thought of this. And this is the Japanese character from Marvel Super. I not only love the game because of how they yell out the moves when you finish it, but I love that English. And this is only the Japanese ROM, so go download it. He's not by any means an awesome character, but that alone makes him legendary in my opinion. And the other one he has, Spinning Ball of Death. Go on.
His character is the character that you just saw. His name is
Norimaru.
Norimaru. He like you said, he's actually in the Japanese version of.
Apparently he's based on like a television personality or something like that, but they made him into an otaku back when it was a bad thing.
Yeah.
And you know, like he sees the girls at the beginning of the fight, he'll take pictures and go like, I believe I have one of those here where he. Here's the second one. One of the items he throws there is a little statue of Akuma, and if you saw it very quickly in Ultra Variety, he turns into Mega Man and stuff like that. So
he's doing a selfie right now,
yeah,
as you can see.
It's just fan service over.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Let's see if I have it on the last one. But if not, I'll explain it. But basically, if he starts the match against, say, the Hulk versus like Sakura, it's completely different. Yeah, no, I don't know. But what he basically does is he freaks out and he's a whole bunch of hearts show up and he's like, yeah, I'm in love. And it's just hilarious. The thing it reminds me of is if anyone's familiar with I don't remember how it's pronounced. I think it's either Mugen or Mugen. What they did with Peter Griffin when he does that, he goes like, "Hi, I'm Peter from Family Guy." It reminds me of Norimaru very much, and he goes like, "Fine, go to hell," and stuff like that. That's just one of the more well-realized characters in that, as opposed to like. I haven't played it in years, but I remember someone put in Rambo by Sprite tinkering with Guile, and someone even put in Fortress Maximus, and he can barely move, and things like that, or the Google logo and stuff like that. So some characters are definitely more well realized than others. And like speaking of random fighting game series, they put in Homer Simpson, and he has Ori Yagami's from the SNK games, but they decided to throw in Dio Brando's one of his finishers from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So that was inspired choice, where he basically lands on a steamroll. He basically throws a steamroller at you, and that's just hilarious. And there is one other thing. When I talk about the artistic part, that's more the next thing, but anything on Street Fighter or Capcom fighting games in general. So, we always hear from the same person. No one else wants to talk? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Just licensing's the main thing. Now that Mickey Mouse is Marvel, you're more likely to see a Star Wars versus Capcom now.
Yeah, I have thought about that.
Sadly, I feel like that's probably going to happen.
To me, that's just like, to me, I view it in a positive way, like for, say, Kingdom Hearts, different game, different topic, but I think that can only add opportunities to it. I don't think it would necessarily, but usually when people talk about it in the context of fighting games, they think I think they're implying that it would be a bad thing. Is that what you're trying to say, or you think it is, would be good?
I think it's like Nintendo, they're not going to roll out a new character to Smash unless there's a fresh IP to, bring awareness. Like, I don't think that they're going to bring in any new characters working on Marvel versus whatever game, unless there's something to coincide with the movie or whatever. It's all about licensing.
I think Marvel lost the licensing. I don't know who, but I don't. No, I know Marvel versus Capcom 3. I think it was Capcom who lost the licensing again to let Marvel put their characters in their video games.
I think that was always a limited thing, like only for a few years, and that's why briefly Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on Xbox, it became very rare. I'm not sure why that particular version of it did, but I think it had something to do with that, like maybe because it had the worst control. I don't know what it was, but I heard that was the most valuable version, even though it didn't compare to like. And you mentioned that you had the Dreamcast version.
I have the Dreamcast version and the PS2 versions.
Mm-hmm. I enjoyed that game, but to me it feels a lot, again, a game by committee. Like not as say bad as like Morgan in Capcom vs. SNK 2, where they just took her sprite from 1994 and just pasted it in the game, and it looks completely different as opposed to Yoon from Street Fighter 3, which it's not the same graphic engine, so they did bother to they took the extra step and redrew him, and like I'm pretty sure at that point, because Street Fighter 3 hadn't really taken off when SNK 2 was first released, so they bothered to do it with him, and yet with, I think Morgan, fan service aside, all those arguments are probably more well known, and yet they just palette swapped him. It's just funny how that was, but game by committee, it's just because they just threw everybody in, and they didn't even do some cool things like I wanted to. Like, aside from hacking, I would have always loved to like tear shit up with Thanos from Marvel superheroes at the end. He's just way too powerful. Or the original form of Magneto from Children of the Atom. You know, he could just randomly with half his like super bar put up an invincible magnetic shield, and you can't hit him for like 45 seconds. And granted, it'd be completely unfair, but I think it'd be a fun way to play that game. You know, if they had done that. To me, it was just like more. 56 characters. You know, but not 56.
No.
How many in Marvel vs. Capcom 2? 56? Okay. But that's what I'm trying to say with this point. I think it's this, like the announcer, and I think that even though there are a lot less characters in the game, I think it gives it more charm, and almost always I'll go back to these games over readily versus Marvel vs. Capcom 2 or something. Plus I hate Marvel vs. Capcom because Onslaught is so difficult, you know? That's just my view though, but...
With the right character, you can actually be Onslaught.
Yeah. I mean, even Cyber Akuma is tough in this one, but if you just keep doing Gamma Charge over and over again, you almost always fall for it, and that's 8 difficulty in the arcade or the home ports. It just, I don't know what it is. I don't think it's a glitch, but I was always able to do it. And
They switched the fighting engine in 3, which I don't really appreciate.
yeah, I do want to play it eventually. I mean, I've seen the graphics and stuff, but it's the kind of game that takes commitment, you know? I am happy. Actually, even more so, I just remembered something. I don't like how there's no storyline in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, even though it's only a few, little blurbs in each of the endings. They do unique things, like having the Hulk come up to Blanca and say, "Oh, you must be a victim of gamma radiation too." You know, those little touches. They obviously didn't have to do that, but and I understand they brought that back in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and had some fun little things.
The storyline from Marvel vs. Capcom is basically unexplained until you beat the game.
Yeah. So it's cool that they did that, and I'm definitely not saying, oh, just because I haven't played it, I never will. But it's just I can't speak on it all that much.
I think that for the next Capcom fighter, they're gonna have to tailor it to being competitive. I think that if they want to actually make a fighter that is respected by the community, they need to make it so it's competitive. And adding a bajillion characters makes it very difficult to balance.
There isn't a lot of. You don't get a lot of adding a lot of characters. Most characters are basically the same. They're basically the same, except they look different. So it's a matter of taste. That's what it comes down to. So
I think the future for Marvel vs. Capcom especially is in the fighting game community. I think. And so if they make another game, it needs to really pander to what they.
It needs to. It needs to be to the fan audience, basically the ones who play it, the die-hard core.
I think the storyline is definitely second priority to.
No doubt, but I'm saying from my perspective, because first money, like I said, and second, like from about 1994, right, 1995 more, when Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo came out, I just kind of became exhausted from that, and my brothers subsequently gave it up. And all throughout that, when I rediscovered the Versus series about 7 years later, they weren't interested. And then that's when I came to start appreciating it more from an artistic point of view, kind of like little things like these. So competition and all that stuff was kind of left by the wayside by no online obviously yet. We didn't really have arcades, so it wasn't a conscious decision on my part. If I had been able to stay on it, I probably would have, but I tend to admire fighting games more from an artistic point of view in that sense nowadays. Before, as you mentioned, Third Strike, before we get to that, anything else? Oh, speaking of cheesiness, I always like the original Power Stone because I love the announcer in that one. Let me see if I can remember how it sounds. It's like, fight one, are you ready? Go! Something like that, I love that one. And they got, even though the second game is undoubtedly better, and Smash Brothers and Smash Brothers fans especially don't give it enough credit because it's a very similar game in some ways, and it came out well before what Smash Brothers became. So I wish people gave it a little bit more props, but that's something else. Any other fighting games or anything? Capcom has tons of them. Okay, so when it comes, given what I was saying about the more artistic side, the whole Street Fighter 3 series was similar to what I was saying about kind of taking a break. They were taking their time on it, but at the same time they felt they had to rush it out because Tekken was becoming big back in 96, 97. And the first point, I don't think it really got exciting, mostly because everybody kind of looked at it. Originally what they wanted to do is they wanted to have Alex, the wrestler, as the main character, and then they kind of put Ryu, Ken, and is Akuma in the first game? No, I think he's only a hidden character, right? As a concession. So it didn't take away from the storyline, but again, that's an example like sticking there to 2D it wasn't until Third Strike where it really became brilliant. But the contrast is also interesting. Music, visuals, the Shin Sharukin, for instance, I love how they give the extra detail in that one as opposed to like seeing it in SNK 2. It's just fun, pixelated and all, but at the same time, Third Strike is also a really derivative game in its own way because, you know, people share stages and stuff like that. If you go back to Double Impact, which unfortunately I don't think has been re-released, you know,
No.
yeah, I mean, you can get the Dreamcast version or the ROMs, obviously. The stages are so much more colorful. The music definitely isn't better, but it's one of those weird things that, given what they could do with the graphic engines, you think they would have carried that over to Third Strike and made it even better because, like, Alina's stage is, while still very nice in Third Strike, it's, like, amazing looking in Double Impact, if you play that one. And it felt like they had to do more and more, but I use an example of, it's nice that they decided to stick to 2D, but then again, you also had the EX series.
Oh god.
Oh, those games.
Oh yeah, you had
As
to
much
mention
as
that, didn't you?
as much as I object to them, I really didn't think the graphics were too bad, and I liked some of the other play. Apparently, people really hate EX3, but I'm like, how could you dislike a game where in the credits you can keep killing Hugo and he keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, you know? So he gets like 15 feet tall at the end or something like that, and you can just keep doing super moves. And I understand, but they also gave us the characters like Crackerjack and Doctrine Dark, and those are very creative guys. And I like Skullmania.
Skullmania.
I like to see those come back because yeah, the graphics, that was kind of a bad idea, but if they did that in like high-res 2D or like in something, I think they could get a second win or a second comeback. But aside from the graphics, everything else about Third Strike was brilliant. And I was really happy when I rediscovered it around 2002, and the first thing I saw was when I heard Urian's theme, as well as the South America stage, because I don't remember ever seeing that in arcades. I do remember reading a review for it around September of '99 when the game came first out, and it was really a weird thing, and of course it caused me to ignore it for a long time. They declared these guys are just derivatives, like Necro and Oro, for instance. They said, oh, they're just Blanca and Dalsim. I'm like, did you not even play the game? And then they give the score of 2 out of 5 for the music, and I'm like, how could you think the music in Third Strike is bad? And there's all these just random things that it seemed like the gaming press collectively did everything they could to reject it, and it was the fans that came back through things like Evo and stuff that made it popular. And in case you're unaware, I was well into my passion for Third Strike by then, but I think this is ultimately what sums up why it's the best. I like to refer to YouTube people as the philosophers of today, but unfortunately I've seen people who don't know what he's doing.
Just as turtle style.
They say what's the big deal? He's just blocking.
Now the version of putting Daigo down, 1-0.
And for some reason you haven't seen it. And I love the crowd reaction.
Yeah, Evo made it popular. Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate it, as I tried to say, from the artistic point of view, like Dudley's music, Alina's, which I featured earlier.
And whoever hates on Dudley needs to leave, right?
They have no dignity, you know?
Yeah.
It's very clear. But I've read the interviews about Daigo and stuff like that. He said very clearly, it wasn't something he planned. He just thought he'd go for it because he had very little. But at the same time, he was still the showman because I don't remember exactly what it is. I think you only have to parry the first 2 hits, and then he could have done the combo. But he decided fuck it, let's go for it. And he was able to do it. And that's just, for a humble guy, I understand he's also pretty short. I don't remember, but he's definitely a showman and stuff like that. And I understand Justin Wong doesn't like to talk about that too much because, he did, from what I wouldn't be embarrassed by that. I'd bow to someone if they did that, intentional or not, but it's nice that the stories behind that. And I continue to, even though I'm not huge into online competition, I still like to follow the stories, and I watch Evo when I get the chance, because I appreciate it from the artistic point of view and stuff like that, little things like that.
And let's see, so we got about a half an hour left, so yeah, we still got time to talk about Street Fighter in general, or even Third Strike. Anything? Or I've been cutting you off a little bit.
No, it's cool because actually I've tried playing Third Strike before.
You don't like it, huh?
No, I love it because it has original characters in it, like Dudley and Alex. Now that when I try to play, it's like with other people, they just whip my ass.
I was playing against the Overclock Remix guys, and they share my views pretty much exactly. And
they basically handed your ass.
No, actually, it was close, and I haven't played it in years. I haven't rebought it on the 360. I got most of my experience, from again the artistic point of view, and then when it was released as part of the anniversary collection with the added bonus on the original Xbox of being online, I felt like, oh boy, I got this. I know how to do the character's moves. I go in and probably get my ass kicked. And that's where I actually learned, because before I never even used to use like medium punch and medium kick, or except for like the Shungo Gatsatsu, I wouldn't really use low punches. I didn't know anything about like 2-in-1s, but I wanted to learn it. And even though, still more from an art point of view, but it's just interesting how the worlds are so very different. But you can enjoy. I think that's why I look back, go all the way back to the beginning of Street Fighter. It's almost laughable that they actually had the debate, and they were serious. The people who wrote about this, like in EGM, Electronic Gaming Monthly, GamePro, they went Street Fighter 2 versus Mortal Kombat, and they actually tried to argue the two from a gameplay point of view.
Yeah.
And it's just, I have all those magazines, so it's a lot of fun to read those old ones, but it's still things like that like I can't believe I hope they look back on those nowadays and go like, wow, why'd we ever write something like this? It wasn't even close. Not that Mortal Kombat is bad, but it definitely doesn't have the artistry and the gameplay essence of that. Another thing they said in the negative review of Third Strike that kind of hinted out before, I remember it's like they said the parrying system can go like straight to hell, and they went like, it requires the patience and precisions of a master, and I'm like, yes it does, but first and foremost it was done to deal with fireball spamming, and that's not really too hard to learn how to parry those, and I think that's one of the best things about it. And you also saw it in Mark of the Wolves and several other games, for that very reason, because projectile spam is lame in many ways.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Any novice can get away with fireball spam, but it takes a master to try to parry.
The onus is on you as a player. You can master it, or you can use it for, but by no means does that make it like, oh, actually, there's something even weirder. I don't know if this was their intention, but they would always talk about like appealing to people by putting Chun-Li in the third game, and then they would say the grading system is so bad. Even the grading system is pretty not inconsequential. It doesn't even really matter, but they like perceive that as like a negative thing. It's like they really seemed like they wanted to do a hit job on Third Strike, all those magazines when it first came out. So again, props to Evo for like convincing everybody otherwise. Any other thoughts or questions for us? Questions among yourselves before we move on?
Nothing else?
Okay, let's see what else I had. Oh yeah.
His favorite, Dino Crisis.
The story behind this is interesting, but I thought of the two things to sum this up, emphasizing the humor a little bit more. But I don't want to spoil it, but when I got back into it, like to play with it, to play before the panel and subsequently the one at Otakon, I was very interesting because I always thought that Dino Crisis 3 got a bad rap, and I found out some very interesting things that we'll get to. But at the same time, someone did a very interesting analysis of the original Dino Crisis. I remember when it first came out, and I certainly thought it was an interesting game. It kind of runs the gamut. Oh, he's not here anymore, but
yeah, I was gonna say,
when it comes to puzzles, when I first played that game, they annoyed the shit out of me. I thought they were annoying, the amateur plumbing and all that stuff, but having played it again recently, it makes it feel very unique because it's one of the few parts of the games that makes it feel unique because given the talent behind that game, Shinji Mikami, Hideki Kojima, Shun Takayama, and all those, it's remarkable how uninspired the gameplay is when it comes to like fighting the dinosaurs. So that's how you enjoy, I feel, the first game ultimately, from the puzzles. And I don't know if it will ever come back because everybody loves to point to Dino Crisis 3 as selling bad and stuff like that, but it'd be nice if they eventually give it another try because those games, those characters, those developers went on to create like Resident Evil 4, Beautiful Joe, Piano 3, which people have, unclear views on. I think it's good, but when you think back on the caliber of the talent there, it's almost remarkable how unremarkable Dino Crisis is. Like, I guess they just had to feel
like they had to make something uncertain. They had to make it very derivative, even though they tried their best, you know, in all the interviews to like say, and they did a good job with it, with the puzzles. But it was really with Dino Crisis 2, where a man came in and he said he personally wanted to direct it, who had mostly, that was Shun Takuma Kumi, and he not only, especially for fans of Resident Evil 4, you know, I got it on the PSN for like 99 cents before. It was like Resident Evil 4 before Resident Evil 4, because you can run and shoot in that game. It's not terribly long, but it's an action masterpiece. And what I found out recently about it that was very interesting is he's well known for creating another little series you might have heard of. It's called Phoenix Wright. And to me, that's amazing, because not only did he refine Dino Crisis from what's frankly a good game, but very derivative, to like amazing action. That's hard enough to make an excellent action game, like Devil May Cry, you know, another area. But he was able to do that and make visual novels interesting. So like, I just think of this, Phoenix Wright is already kind of separate from itself. You know, they're far more compelling than like, say, the older games like Shadowgate, Deja Vu, Uninvited, King's Quest. The games that, if you know what to do, there's no challenge. And I'm not saying they have tons of replay value, but the first thing I think of when I think of vastly different talent in different genres, I mean, it makes me wonder why this guy isn't getting work, you know, similar to what we were saying earlier about Resident Evil. Like, you take Resident Evil, let's see what you could do with it, you know, like a visual novel action hybrid. That would be like, if anyone could do something interesting with it, he certainly could. And I've only played like 2 Phoenix Wright games, because that's something that was apparently that is undebatable when it comes to politics of it. You know, like the very first Phoenix Wright that was based on the Game Boy Advance game, they only printed like 5,000 copies or something when it came out in 2005, so hugely jumped in value after only like a month or 2. And then I wanted to play it, of course, you know, especially on handheld, but it wasn't unavailable by then. And then at the same time, they have a kind of dichotomy going on, because that's when they released, of all things, the score to Resident Evil 4, complete with a nice art book. So like, they want to take away stuff we do want, and then they release stuff that we normally wouldn't buy at all. It's like really kooky decisions from Capcom management in many ways. So eventually the popularity did come, but by that time it was almost too late. Not too late, but I kind of missed it when it came to Phoenix Wright, and that's why I'm glad they put them all on iOS for like $10. And I'm slowly but surely playing through them, but visual novels being what they are, you can only play so much of them before they kind of get tiresome, in my opinion. The way my friend sums it up, it's like he played the first one when it came out, then he had to wait like 2008 and like 2010, I believe, and that time in between them made them inherently more palpable. And it's just an interesting way to contrast back to Dino Crisis. But before we do the more, in case I'm boring anyone, which I'm sure I am, the more humor aspect, I thought of a good way to sum up Dino Crisis is thoughts on Phoenix Wright or anything like that. No one's played Phoenix Wright? Oh,
well, we got
I thought for
someone
sure
right
that
here.
would be really
All right,
popular.
yeah.
Go, sure. Do you kind of agree with what I'm saying, or am I objection, dead wrong? I originally was going to do something like that, but you know, maybe at a bigger event. Maybe if I do this in January again.
My experience with Phoenix Wright, I guess, isn't as involved. It just looked fun, and so I got it for a Christmas present.
Have you played other text adventures or visual novel games, as they're referred to in Japan?
I have, but in different ways, like Device 6.
Is that, I'm not familiar with that. What kind of? I guess there are quite a lot of them. Because the one I go to, the other one that most people I think would cross genres, besides obviously sounding Phoenix Wright, is Radical Dreamers, which is the game in between Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross. And that's a really good game, but it has the same problems as all text adventures. You know, there's different choices you can make, but you only want to play it occasionally. You know.
Yeah.
But if you have more, sure, tell us. No, not really. Okay. Okay, so let's go for the humor, and hopefully we can make people laugh again. So I thought the ultimate, this was, and this is fun, contrasting it with like, you know, those Street Fighter Third Strike comments, you know, like, people are pretty fucking stupid on YouTube sometimes, but then when I saw this, sometimes.
Sometimes, really?
Remember, I'm a teacher, so I hold out hope, you know, whenever, you know, so people can be pretty shitty sometimes, but I saw this and I thought, it's too bad I didn't see the person who credited it because I think someone modded it, and I thought, what a great way to sum up one of the most epic scenes in Dino Crisis 2. And I hope I can do this well. So. And I think you'll understand immediately what I'm doing.
You again? Persistent thing, aren't you?
Getting sent out Gigantosaurus. And this was a year before Jurassic Park 3, so people often compare it to that. And that was all from a YouTube comment. I thought a good way to bridge the gap between people who might not be familiar with Dino Crisis. But you don't really see it from that, but that's an example of a very well-directed scene. But the gameplay is just, think Resident Evil 4, but you can shoot when you can run and shoot. It's just really like balls to the wall action. It's only, I don't know what the regular price is, I think it's like $5 or something, but it's absolutely worth it. And any thoughts on Dino Crisis or in general before we move on to what I'm attempting to vindicate, which is Dino Crisis 3?
No? Any questions? No?
Okay.
All right.
Working from what you need to know about Dino Crisis 3 is that it was a game that was kind of arbitrary and similar to what people, I don't remember who said that, but he said oh, I read that on IGN. And I always take, whenever I hear read it on IGN or reported by IGN, I always take that with a grain of salt because setting aside the meme, you can't spell ignorant without IGN, I think the best way to sum up IGN is when, Gabe, I'm just gonna call them Gabe and Tycho over at Penny Arcade because I forget their real names. But I love how they pretty much proved in Enchanted Arms, which is an early Xbox 360 game, by analyzing IGN's review, they were able to prove that they played about 20 minutes of the game in their review, and ooh, sick burn, and
God, don't remind
and this
me
is the #1 video game site there is, so that's what I always say. But the point I'm trying to make is they declared that Dino Crisis 3 has the worst camera ever, and
everyone's well aware of why that is. About playing 20 minutes and then writing professional review.
yeah. I'm not about to say, oh, you gotta play, no, you gotta play 40 minutes or 4 hours. I think it was just because they hid behind the airs of professionalism, trust us, we're #1, and of course they gave it a mediocre review, That's what kept games like Majora's Mask down for so long, because that's different again, but that certainly didn't help anybody. But to me, it's one of those things I often can't meet people halfway on. Because if you're going to use the logic that a camera ruins the game, one of my friends summed it up the best way. They say essentially because the enemies can attack you off screen. That's not true. You'll see them coming at you, and you can move so fast in the game because you have a jetpack. It does follow Resident Evil because it has the spots where the cameras choose. But if you're going to use that logic, you want to know something? In the original Mario Brothers, if you don't move, what's going to happen to you?
Time will
So
the
Goomba will come and kill you. So what game do you not have to move to survive? So how is that any different? It's one of those catch-all complaints that I guess people are just supposed to understand, kind of not to be too political, but when we're told as teachers, something's not in the budget, you're just supposed to go, next. But when you think about it, it doesn't make sense at all. But all throughout the PlayStation era and many other games, this worst camera ever, and just games entirely dismissed. Games like Maximo, Dino Crisis 3, many others. And I just never understood it. Rygar was another one because inherently that's what you gotta do that's what you gotta do. You always gotta press forward. Games, maybe 2D games were better at doing it, but that's not a reason to give a game a really bad score. And what its biggest weakness is that it really has nothing to do with the rest of the Dino Crisis series. But it seems like people really haven't played them that much here, so it's not really a big deal. But I thought if the best way to sum it up would be by showing this. And if nothing else, I think you have to look at what is ultimately one of the creatures they came up for. And look, that's pretty inspired design. And if people had played that far, they would have probably agreed. And I think that's what's next. Yeah. Look at that fucking thing. I just think Alien when I see that thing. That thing would totally be at home in any Alien movie. What that is that's known as the Selbari, which is what the game basically happens in the game is that besides the whole space dinosaurs joke, that was the other big thing. I kind of forgot about that. I don't know if people remember that. What people have to remember about dinosaurs, I actually read it very clearly. There's this theory out there that they call shrink-wrap dinosaur syndrome. Whenever you see dinosaurs, they're essentially just like, you just stretch their meat and skin over their skeleton. Like, that's not how evolution and creatures' biology works. So maybe, obviously this isn't what they were thinking. This is an example of me thinking too far ahead, but maybe it's not too far that they would have like exposed musculatures or random things like this. Because the dinosaurs in this game aren't even dinosaurs. They're actually genetic mutations that are created from human DNA, because what basically happens on the ship is that all the humans die, or as I like to notice when I was playing through the game, there's one of the crew members is Elizabeth Bathory apparently, so maybe she killed them all or something. If you don't know who Elizabeth Bathory is, she was the source of the Dracula myths and everything like that. That's neither here nor there. But what basically happens is that the computer, which is also called Mother in that, another Alien reference, it's very much of the HAL mentality, like the black and white, like if you're a fan of 2001, it crosses that also. It's like, it does its best to interpret what the captain says. It's like, our crew is doomed, so make a race that can survive in space. So you can't clone humans directly, so for some inexplicable reason they have dinosaur DNA on board and they hybrid them, and that's when you end up getting creatures like that. And the whole goal, say what you will about Prometheus or not, but you can see in a movie like Prometheus and Alien, the marks of genetic engineering, just like they do this. Because this creature, the one you saw at the end, can survive in space. And to a computer which sees things only in terms of like zeros and ones, it accomplished its mission perfectly. Because in Alien, that's what they do too. They can survive in space. That's what's known as an anaerobic life form and stuff like that. And if you approach the game like that, I find that to be quite interesting, because I know people complain about like 2010, they don't like the answers that Arthur C. Clarke gave to HAL. They prefer like, the more philosophical stuff. Was he affected by the monolith? But it's simply a black and white thing, if you will. But now I'm kind of drifting from the topic. It's too bad that Dino Crisis 3 is ultimately so hard to play. It's not, you can't play it on 360. It's only, it's fairly expensive, but it's one of those games that I don't think got a fair shake at all. Working from the point of view of Dino Crisis 2, it has a great bosses that were like giant things, not just things like that, but like creative takes on Spinosauruses, Gigantosauruses, that clearly seem to be an inspiration for like some of the very creative bosses in Resident Evil 4. And it has the same combo system, so it's still very action-based, but it's almost like it's one of the few things that you have to look back on wistfully. And I'm going on and on. So, anything else?
I gotta play Dino Crisis 3.
Yeah. I wish it was easier, but if I've achieved nothing else, I'm sure you would agree from seeing that thing. It's pretty freaky looking, wouldn't you say? Genetic engineering is mad, yeah. And especially if you have a very black and white computer in charge of it. It's just like, take whatever you can and do whatever you can until you do it. The last interesting thing about it is you see these eel-looking like things. They kind of look like lampreys in the beginning of the game. That's apparently what they evolve into eventually. And I'm like, whoa, that's scary. Yeah. And I don't really have any time left which was the last thing, which was, what else was there? I think it was, let's just do a little bit about my favorite version of Final Fight. Ooh.
Mr. Haggard, so pleased to make your acquaintance.
Final Fight CD, really?
Don't hang up.
As far as I can tell, this is all done by the same people, women included.
Your daughter for your cooperation. And we'll throw in the regular monthly bonus to your salary. We offered me over.
What? What happened to Jessica? Who is this? Not so fast.
He's angry.
Can you tell?
You son of a... What have you done to her? Nothing yet. But we enjoy the opportunity. Listen to reason, man. Why make your job difficult?
Yeah, he looks angry.
Just let the computer
Despite what the voice acting is trying to say.
like the mayor before you did.
I love the game. I love the game though.
I can't stand the voice acting though.
Yeah. I avoided it for the same reason for a very long time, but one of the also remarkable things, besides being, even though I am more of a Streets of Rage fan, the music, especially in the Final Fight CD version, because it uses Red Book audio, is quite amazing. And even if you never play the game, I recommend downloading the soundtrack, and it's quite good. I think it's better than the arcade original. And even though it wasn't quite what I intended, but we did it back and forth, so we got about 5 minutes left. So any other, we don't really have any closing thoughts, so comments, any questions you want to ask? We'll ask among ourselves. More from you?
Yeah, anybody want to chime in?
Oh, yeah, we kind of touched on that. I mean, it's something that's usually a popular topic, but the way I see it is,
speaking of like Capcom's future, their decision to not make a remake.
Oh yeah. I was actually hoping for a new Mega Man X, like X9, because I really want Axel to come back. I really do. I love Axel.
I would like more, kind of like, people tend to look at it from a negative point of view, but like Street Fighter versus Mega Man, even though it was a fan game that they licensed, for the
Yeah.
I'd love to see if they could do more things like that. Like, unfortunately, I can't play Mega Man Unlimited because it's only on PC, and there are emulators, but there are, virtual machines, but I haven't really tried that hard because I'd like a legitimate release of it, because that game is awesome, especially how it ties in kind of like what the Power Fighters tried to do, showing how powerful Zero is, things like that.
Yeah.
And I think, fine, retire the character if you don't want to have anything to do with it, sales-wise. I usually use the example of Beautiful Joe because the gameplay is similar in its own ways. I was extremely disheartened to find out recently that it was like Resident Evil 4, the opposite. They ported it to the PS2 hoping it would sell more. Apparently it only sold like 6,000 copies on the PS2, and that's an example of like showing love, kind of the opposite to like the conspiracy theories that some people might have. And Mega Man, unfortunately, is in a similar situation. The games don't sell, so if passion aside, it's a pretty clear-cut decision,
Yeah.
So
Is it the thing with
yeah.
Nintendo and like copyright stuff as well? Like Capcom, can they not make Mega Man?
Oh, that's the only way is like with Donkey Kong and Rare and stuff. It seems to be on a case-by-case basis, so I'm not sure, but. I do know that they're trying to sell their assets, and the way they commented on it was people don't seem to realize just how valuable assets are, because that you can still get some direct control over it, but similar to, you could still offer them insight, or they could ask Capcom and their developers, like, hey, we're not going to try and turn, like, say, oh, I know, we're not going to try and release Mega Man Soccer 2 or something like that, but it would be nice to see a fresh take. My go-to example is the Phoenix Wright creator, but I don't think it's what he has, because except for the side thing with Dino Crisis 2, he made visual novels before and since. But it would be cool if someone had a similar attitude or vision for it. And I'd say, as long as the what was that word I just used? The assets are respected. I think, who knows where they could go? I think they could do almost anything with it, except Mega Man Soccer 2. Something like that. But yeah, I think I don't think.
Probably are just retiring like the classic Mega Man formula, like the game formula, like the original platform kind of style.
I don't think, like a lot of things, we can be nostalgic about the past, but I don't know if it's really possible without, I'm not trying to sound boring or anything like that, but speculating about the future, when sometimes companies do things on a whim, you know, and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
it doesn't
look out.
mean that, you know, but we have to show our support, and hopefully we will, you know.
Yeah, look what they did for Mega Man X. They did side story command missions,
Yeah.
which I enjoy command missions.
Yeah, I was able to pick that up for pretty cheap, and I've always heard it was very good, and I want to try it.
It is.
Yeah.
Anyone who's not played Mega Man Command Missions, I would at least pick it up, give it a try. It doesn't follow the Mega Man formula. It's mostly RPG, but it has some decent characters you can play as.
I did remember, I just had one more thing. This is like just a general message, and this is the teacher in me, so I apologize, but if there's one message you take away from this panel, or any of the panels you attend with me, I hope it would be this. Because, as I like to say, is once someone told me when Ego Raptor had the same feelings about Castlevania 4 as I did, I felt like someone popular agrees with me, I feel validated. And when I heard him say this, I'm like, I've been saying this for years. Now, be careful to who you say it to, because you might get punched, but this is still the absolute truth.
Maybe you're the kind of person who remembers which bush to burn in The Legend of Zelda to find the labyrinth, or maybe you're the kind of person who remembers the score to some sports game years ago. Maybe you like to go around in a Star Trek uniform, or you like to go around in a sports uniform. And I don't mean like a sports t-shirt, but the same jersey that the players in the game wear. Whatever the case, maybe, somehow, in our own ways, we're all nerds.
And we are, because by definition, a nerd is someone who's just like obsessed with information, data, very analytical. But the only difference is they have popular culture behind them, you know, and I like to joke, it's like, you know, when people wear the jerseys, they're cosplaying, you know? Yeah. And it's just, like I said, be careful who you say it to, because you might get punched, but basically. I think it's something that people need to remember. As George Carlin once said, rest his soul. We're far more similar than we are different. And it's only people with vested interest, you know, not like Capcom conspiracy theorists who want to tell us, I'm talking about politicians, because they want to tell us to say how different we are, because their goal is to keep making money and stay in power. But ultimately, we're far more similar than we are different. And as I think that articulates it very well. So I hope you enjoyed this, and we're gonna have to, speaking of the AVGN, I hope to get into the premiere, because it's about to start very soon.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you for all your comments, and I hope you enjoyed this and that I didn't bore anyone too much. Thank you.
Thanks for playing, presented by Capcom.
Thank you for your help.